Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Charles. I want to welcome you guys to another episode of the Dreamerspro Show, where we cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, and when we give you a first perspective on things and how we see it. And in today's episode, the topic is why Paul George is under immense pressure going into training camp and going into this NBA season. So that's the topic I want to get into in today's video. But before we get into that, I want you guys to please make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell to be notified whenever we drop our content. Also, be sure to check out our Dreamerspro Podcast, which we have linked in the description below. So with that being said, let's just get straight into the content here. So training camp is around the corner rather. It all depends when you guys again are watching these videos. But training camp is almost here. It's starting next week. We're doing this video on November 29th. So next week things will start ramping up. And going into training camp, there are a lot of players actually that I'm gonna have my eye on, because a lot of players need to really try to enhance their legacies going into the NBA this season. People like Joel Embiid, Paul George, and others. But in this video, I just decided to talk about one person so I don't end up doing a 35-minute long video. So let's talk about Paul George for a second, because I actually got a lot that I want to say about Paul George. So if you look at his career, he's been fairly successful, really successful actually. The guy, he already has a max NBA contract, which is something that a lot of players don't get. Think of even a Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson never got a max contract because I think to qualify for it, I think on that year you got to make an All-NBA team or something like that. And Paul George did, but Klay Thompson didn't do it that time. But Paul George is a 6-time All-Star. He's been on one All-First NBA team. He's been on 4 All-Third NBA teams. So he's been on 5 All-NBA teams. He's been on 4 All-Defensive teams, 2 All-First in 2014, 2019, and 2 Second Defensive teams in 2013 and 2016. So basically, since 2013, the guy has been on an All-Defensive player, and he also won the Most Improved Player of the Year award in 2013, and he also led the league in steals. And this was one of the reasons why, when they were able to pick him up, the Clippers were able to pick him up, I was really excited. Now, let me just say this, because a lot of crazy things that people say. So let me just say this. Kawhi Leonard, I've said this before, maybe some people haven't heard it, but I'll say it again. Kawhi Leonard is my favorite basketball player. And the reason that is because he reminds me of my all-time favorite basketball player, Kobe Bryant. Let me say that before. Kobe's my favorite basketball player that's ever played. And Kawhi Leonard, they have this connection, and so that's why he's my favorite player, and I like the way he plays. Because he's my favorite player, some people feel that, oh my God, he's a Clippers fan. He's a Clippers. No, Kawhi Leonard's my favorite player. I'm not like a Clippers fan. It's just that he plays for that team, so I support him. It's the same way that Shannon Sharpe would probably supported the Miami Heat, definitely supported the Cleveland Cavaliers, and now supports the Lakers because he's a LeBron James fan. Not that he's a Lakers fan. Shannon Sharpe never used to support the Lakers. Before LeBron went to the Lakers, he was never talking about the Lakers. I wanted to get that out there. I'm a Kawhi fan, but this is a sports channel. It just so happens that I talk about the Clippers because that's the team he's playing on. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there, because there's some people saying a lot of outlandish things. Somebody said I get paid from the Clippers. How the hell am I going to get paid for the Clippers to do their videos? Do you know how much money? Do you know how many subs you would need for them to even consider us to pay us? So please, let me just get that out there. Let me just say it explicitly so we can kind of just put that to rest. Anyway, back to the topic here. So let's talk about Paul George. He's had a great career. Now, last season, the Clippers gave up a lot to get him. Like, they gave up a lot to get Paul George. And that all had to do with the fact that Kawhi Leonard requested for him. Now, why would Kawhi Leonard request for Paul George? Although he wasn't his first option, he did try to get Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant decided to go play with the Brooklyn Nets. He tried to get Jimmy Butler. All of us saw the value of Jimmy Butler, especially in the NBA playoffs this year, and seeing how he performed in the finals. I mean, he probably has the biggest heart in the NBA if we're just talking about, a competitor. So we saw how well Jimmy Butler performed. But looking at Paul George, the year before he came to play with the Clippers, Paul George was top 5 in MVP voting, or top 3 in MVP voting, and top 3 in Defensive Player of the Year. I think a lot of people kind of missed that. That season, in 2018-2019 season, Paul George averaged, playing 37 minutes a game, averaged 28 points per game. He shot, 44% from the field, shot almost 39% from the three-point line for the season. He shot 84% from the free throw line. He got you 8.2 rebounds, 4.1 assists, and 2.2 steals. That was Paul George's numbers for the season. Now, granted, the fact that his numbers kind of dipped in the playoffs, but those were his numbers, and I think it was that year that got him his max contract. So Paul George was having an amazing season, and he was the best player on that team. If you watched him on the Oklahoma, he was better than Russ and all. He was just the best player on that team. So when the Clippers gave up all of these picks and all of this to get him, one expected that they got a really, really solid player, two-way player, probably one of the top 5 or 3 two-way players in the league with him, Kawhi, Jimmy Butler, and maybe some other players that I'm probably missing. So what happened? Towards the end of the season, when he was playing with the Oklahoma City Thunder, he got injured. So he had to get shoulder surgery, and he missed training camp in Hawaii. And due to his injury, his surgery, it caused him to miss some games going into the season. And what a lot of us didn't realize was that him missing so many games was actually going to add to the fact that he didn't get to practice with the team, and added to the lack of chemistry that they had. So he missed most of the games. Then he came back and he started playing games. Now for the season, the guy averaged 21.5 points, 5.7 rebounds, 3.9 assists. And as you can see, his numbers dropped a lot. And he got you 1.4 steals. Now, a lot of that could have been due to the fact of his injury. He still shot very good from the three. For the season, he shot 41% from the three-point line and 86%, almost 88% from the free throw line. So he put up those numbers, but we weren't used to seeing him score as much. Although there were some games where he had 40-plus points. There was even a game when him and Kawhi had 40 points together, right? Just showing what they could be if they were clicking on all cylinders. So what happened? He was up and down all season long, and he got injured again, and then we had the layoff, and then we had the startup again in the bubble. And in those 8 games in the bubble, Paul George showed his worth. He showed his value. The guy averaged in those 8 games 25.5 points, and he shot like over 50% from 3. And I was just like, man, this is the Paul George I've been expecting to see. But however, a lot of people just didn't believe in him because of his history of disappearing. And sure enough, right on cue, in these playoffs, Paul George completely and totally disappeared. If we look at his playoff production, if I can pull the numbers up, his production went even further down. He averaged 20 points per game in the playoffs. His shooting percentage went down to 39%. His three-point percentage went down to 33%. He got you 6.6 rebounds, so that was okay, and 3.8 assists. And his steals were down to 1.5. And if you saw him in the playoff run, given the fact that other players on that team disappeared, like the bench mob that was getting them close to like 37 points a game in Lou Williams, and Montrezl Harrell, who their production dropped down about 20 points per game, going from 37 points per game. So they disappeared. But Paul George was the most inconsistent player on that team. He was the max player. He was the one that was supposed to be Kawhi Leonard's running mate. Kawhi Leonard was putting up amazing numbers. All of his numbers went up in the playoffs, which is something I always expect from Kawhi Leonard. All of his numbers went up. He had amazing numbers in the playoffs. So what ended up happening was Paul George just had a terrible showing, and we all remember the shot that he hit off of the side of the backboard, which kind of just, which was like the icing on the cake to just sort of, solidify such a bad run that he had. Now, however, after that, he had some comments, and I'm just going to quote him verbatim. I don't know exactly. I'm just going to paraphrase him. Excuse me. I'm going to paraphrase what he said when they asked him about what he thought about how the team lost, and he was like, "Yeah, we weren't really expected to win." And I was just like, "What? Of course you were expected to win." And to me, that statement didn't sit well. It rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, including me. After all the hype, after all the Clippers gave up, after the way you guys were walking around like you were supposed to be winning the title and you did, you can't have that statement. So going into training camp and going into especially going into training camp, the reason why I'm saying going into training camp is this. In training camp, players are going to start being interviewed by reporters. Reporters are going to ask questions, and if they're good reporters, they're going to ask them, so what's your mindset like? What do you think? You're going to ask them what happened last season, all of this. And I'm going to be very interested to see what are some of the things Paul George is going to say regarding last season. Is going to speak to his mind, his state of mind. And if he says things that are encouraging, I'm going to be very happy about that. But if he seems to have like a nonchalant attitude about it, and looks like he doesn't really grasp the fact that he grossly underperformed and he was one of the reasons that team got knocked off, then I'm going to be worried. So I'm really interested to see what he says in training camp, and I'm also going to be interested to see how he plays going into the season. Obviously, the ultimate measure of him is going to be how he performs when the team gets to the playoffs. But I'm really going to be interested in that because Paul George is a lot of pressure. He has everything he wants. He has his contract. He has respect. He's on the championship caliber team, but now he has to come through for the team. And I think he's going to be under a lot of pressure given the fact that now people are making fun of him for how he performs. And there's some truth to it. You know, there's a reason why Skip Bayless calls him George Paul. There's some truth to it. And it's for him, for his legacy, he needs to come back and try to redeem himself. So I'm going to be watching him. And it's not going to be something that's going to be done in one game. It's not going to redeem himself in one game or in a week or in a month. We're going to have to look at his numbers throughout the season, look at his demeanor, look at some of the things that he's saying, and then see how he performs in the playoffs. But obviously, it's going to be a long time away from that from now. But that's he's definitely one of the players that are under immense pressure going into training camp. So what I want to know from you guys is, do you agree with me that Paul George is under pressure and he really needs to prove himself? Or do you think that, hey, listen, given the fact that he's under pressure, you still don't believe he's going to be able to take the next step as a basketball player mentally to be able to be reliable in the playoffs? So whatever you guys think, please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. Again, if you enjoyed the video, please make sure you go ahead and hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell to be notified whenever we drop our content. Once again, this is Charles here from Dreamerspro. Wishing you guys an amazing day.